Hello, and welcome to If Guitars Could Speak, the documentary series where we examine a famous musician, piece of gear, or important moment from rock history. Today we will be looking at another Les Paul, one that has taken on a legendary status almost bordering on myth. Of course, I'm talking about the Les Paul that Slash used on one of the most successful rock albums of all time, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. This iconic guitar was responsible for reigniting interest in the Les Paul lineup after several years of relative obscurity, as rock players had moved toward brands like BC Rich, Jackson, and Ibanez in the early part of the 80s. But Gibson's resurgence behind Appetite for Destruction is the ultimate example of irony, as Slash's guitar had a shocking secret that was, well, you know what, before we dig into it, please remember to subscribe to the channel to see more content like this, and hit the like button below so that you can let YouTube know that you think other guitar fans would like to see videos like this. With that, away we go. Guns N' Roses was formed in 1985 out of the ashes of two LA hard rock bands, the LA Guns and the Hollywood Roses. After a couple of months of arguments, lineup changes, and ego battles, the final lineup of the classic Guns N' Roses was finalized in June of 1985 when Slash joined. The band would have a rough start to rock stardom, embarking on a disorganized tour of the West Coast that saw both their vans break down, forcing them to hitchhike their way back to LA with nothing but their guitars on their backs. Bass player Duff McKagan would say this trip had set a benchmark for what we were capable of, what we could and would put ourselves through to achieve our goals as a band. They would later dub it the Hell Tour. The band began to draw huge crowds to their hard-rocking old-school style, and soon the record labels came calling. The band would eventually sign with Geffen Records, despite getting an almost double offer from Chrysalis Records. But Geffen would offer total artistic freedom, while Chrysalis wanted to change the band's image. It would take over a year before GNR and Geffen would settle on a producer for what would become the band's debut album, with many demos being recorded to see who the band would finally gel with. In the end, rock veteran Mike Klink was selected for his experience in recording hard rock acts. He would even put up with Axl Rose demanding that he record his vocals one line at a time. Appetite for Destruction would finally be released in July of 1987, and for some rock fans it was well worth the wait, but oddly the album wouldn't take off until almost a year later, after the band had toured extensively and received more radio play. Once the ball got rolling, however, there was no stopping it. The album would spawn massive hits in Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, and Sweet Child of Mine, and go on to sell over 30 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums of all time. Almost immediately, guitarists everywhere perked up and listened to the incredible rock tones being laid down throughout the album by the band's behatted, sunglassed lead guitarist. Everyone needed to know what guitar he used, what amp, everything that made this epic sound. Fans could see Slash playing a burst Les Paul on those first world tours, but the story of where this guitar came from would surprise everybody. During the recording of Appetite, Slash was becoming more and more frustrated by his tone. He was using several Jackson and BC Rich guitars and just wasn't getting the power that he was looking for. The band's manager, Alan Niven, would go on a hunt for a guitar that would suit Slash's tastes, and he'd heard about a place where he might score one. He went down to Music Works in Redondo Beach, California. He remembers paying about $2,500 for a gorgeous Lemon Burst Les Paul, and dutifully returned it to the studio to present it to Slash. The story goes that as soon as Slash plugged the guitar into the Marshall, the magical tone blew everybody in the room away. He had found his Excalibur. Reports are a bit murky as to how much this guitar was actually used on the album. Some say he only used it for the solos, others stating that it did get used for many overdubs and many riffs and rhythm parts. However much it was used, with that album, Slash entered into the pantheon of legendary guitar players, often spoken of amongst the very best. Predictably, Slash's use of the Les Paul caused a surge in copycat guitarists who were searching for a similar tone. Almost immediately, Gibson saw a huge increase in the popularity of the Les Paul line of guitars. Rockers everywhere were rediscovering the sweet but raunchy tones that could be coaxed from a properly fitted Paul, and the vintage market for burst Les Pauls, those made between 1958 and 1960 by Gibson, exploded and have never come down to this day. Gibson certainly welcomed the new interest in the Les Paul line, which again found itself on the rocks financially in the mid-80s due to the Super Strat fad that had lasted through their entire decade. Now suddenly every hard rocker needed a big honking Les Paul to sound just like Slash. But despite all this hullabaloo for Gibson, most guitar fans didn't know that the guitar Slash played on Appetite for Destruction wasn't a Gibson at all. It was a copy, albeit an extremely well-made copy, made by California luthier Chris Derrig. He had a small shop behind Music Works and was known for making 59 copies that were extremely authentic and made from high-quality woods. In fact, Derrig even traveled back to New England to harvest maple for this particular guitar from an old barn that was being taken down. Derrig was originally known to put 59 PAF humbuckers into the copies, but this time, for some reason, he decided to go with Seymour Duncan Alnico 2 zebra-colored pickups, which gave the guitar a more modern sound, along with the vintage scream from the wood. A legendary, one-of-a-kind axe had been born. Unfortunately, Derrig would die of cancer in 1987, before the guitar became the legend that it is today. But Derrig and Slash unwittingly would once again renew the public's interest in the Gibson Les Paul, in much the way that Eric Clapton did in the mid-60s, when he used a Les Paul on John Mayall's seminal Blues Breakers album. The 90s would see a renaissance of Gibson returning to form, not just with the Les Paul, but also with the 335, and in metal, with the Explorer and Flying V models. So, in a strange way, it was a fake Gibson that saved Gibson. Slash continues to use this Les Paul copy as his main recording guitar to this day. He retired it from touring after a couple of years, fearing the wear and tear of the road would eventually destroy it. He told a story of a fan running away with the guitar after he jumped into the crowd. Luckily, security was able to stop the man before he was able to leave the arena. But it was stories like that which forced Slash to retire it. To complete the ultimate irony, Gibson last year released the Slash collection, basing the Les Paul Standard off of his number 1. So, Gibson was forced to examine and copy a copy of a Gibson. Sometimes, the rock and roll gods are just hilarious. That's another episode of If Guitars Could Speak. Remember to subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel if you want to see more content like this, and drop a like on the video if you want to let YouTube know that other guitar fans would like to see it. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.